What is the truth behind the few painted DeLoreans that are running around? This one, the frame's pulled out of.
This is a 3,500 mile car that's original down to the NCT tires. This has the tires that were rolled out of the factory.
Gotta have the shape. Alright. Yeah, he was just showing me off camera with the issues that they have, which is a common thing you see on the internet.
So this car, you can see it's got, the doors don't want to stay up on their own. So the first thing you do, there's two reasons for that. It can either have a soft door strut. So the first thing you want to do is replace the door strut, and if that doesn't get the door to open properly, it may need adjustment of the torsion bar, which is a little more involved.
But they have a jig to do that, and it's not recommended somebody like me do it, because if you do it wrong, he was just explaining to me, you'll take out the back glass, which separates the engine compartment from the driver's compartment right here. That's the glass. So if you could pop the back, and I'll show that, plus also see how you get to the engine in these.
So that's here, and then there's, so this again works on struts just like the doors. And then there's another release for what we call the engine cover up here. So this one you can see, it's kind of clean and how you'd expect for a car with such low mileage. And again, very original. One of the first things people will do is change out this plastic pressurized, what we call a header bottle. You can kind of tell that one has pretty low mileage on it because it's relatively white. But there's a hot stream of coolant that comes off the head and sprays the back of the bottle. You can see some discoloration here, and eventually this will start to crack and leak. So we usually recommend putting a metal bottle on it since it's a pressurized tank.
Yeah, I've seen them with, like, I guess they make them out of stainless or aluminum.
Yep. Another thing that's indicative of a low mileage car, a lot of times these will turn yellow and get very wrinkly with higher mileage, and you can tell that's another thing that's a good telltale that this is a pretty low mileage car, along with the tread on the NCTs again we got here.
Important vehicles, negative ground.
Yeah.
Other than some really old, like 30s and 40s, I never seen one yet.
Yeah.
A positive ground.
They transitioned that in the States, and like by the 40s that was phased out. But in Europe they kept it much longer, so that's kind of an important tag to have on it for a European car, because they did do positive ground.
Oh, true. They built them in Northern Ireland, or I don't know exactly like where on the map that is, but
yep, in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Yep.
You know, Belfast. That's where they built the Titanic too. Let's see how well that ended.
So there's not much. You got room for a small duffel bag, or it's relatively shallow.
Yeah, well, that's got more storage space than my Harley.
Oh, yeah.
And my Goldwing, so.
Yeah, it's better than a side bag, I guess.
And your fuel, again, this is one you have to open the trunk to gas it up.
So your fuel's going to be right here in the same spot, but you'll lift the hood entirely up to fill it up.
What are these?
This one is for a plug that covers the cap for a manual transmission. So there's your clutch fluid. And then this is actually just a drain, because you can see this is a seal right here that keeps the water out of the trunk area, but it's allowed to come within here, and that's
so it drains down.
Drains down this
off the bottom of the car.
Yep, underneath the car.
And the master cylinder is serviced, I guess, under the rug.
Yep, it's right here. So there.
Can you hold the hood?
This plug, I got it. This plug right here, that's where your brake master cylinder would go. And this is obviously a spare tire well that has the fuel pump beneath it. So this panel here is to serve as your fuel pump. This would be to service mainly some steering shaft, possibly, and brake master cylinder. And then there's another cover here that would be for fuel filler or also steering. And then this is just a storage door where you would have your jack and tire changing items in this bag. And then this right here would be your windshield washer fill. Now,
smaller wheels to the front than the rear, or is this one modified? I'm just noticing they look.
This is all stock. So on front, you're running a 195 a 60/14 tire stock, and then rear would be a 235/60 15 in the rear. So it's a 14 fronts, 15 rears, and then they also have an offset on the rear wheel from it being much wider.
Look at this one in here in storage. Just got the updated coolant bottle.
Yep. We did a dress package to this, so we powder coat 5 pieces of the motor intake, W pipe, the 2 valve covers, and the timing cover. And then we take off and plate everything that we can. So all the brackets have been re-zinc plated, which is the original finish. All the bolts, so to kind of dress things up. And then we may do something, it's always kind of a trip, what do you do with the AC compressor if we're not replacing that? We may try to clean this up or paint it, but it's kind of the ugly piece in here right now.
That exhaust system, you said that's a stage.
It's a stage 1 exhaust. It's also been ceramic coated.
Let's see, it's got the cats right there. There's one on that side.
Yep.
I know the lighting is terrible for the camera. I don't have a...
So our stage 1 is it's a pair of headers, 2 cats, and then a muffler that ties them together. This also has the upgraded fuel line setup, which is a great idea. The originals are kind of a fire hazard. They go up in flames.
Yeah, that's why you replace your fuel lines.
Yeah.
I guess they're prone to fire with that. Well, that rubber, as old as it is.
Yeah, they're not really, shouldn't really trust them anymore.
Oh man, that's terrible. I guess there'd be some good parts out of it. Framework in the front, maybe. Oh, that's terrible. All right, hit it.
It's just stock exhaust. 12,000 mile car that's really been gone through, and it's in nice shape. Typical for them to hunt until they get warm. It'll do that for up to 5 minutes, depending on the temperature. It's kind of cold storage back there. It's probably 50 degrees back here. So, but yeah, this is a nice runner. It starts right up.
Yeah, see back here, it's like you guys. This is not. Well, it's got a sticker on it. So this is your storing this only, or?
Well, this one got some work and it's waiting to get picked up. But this side of the shop, pretty much no mechanical work is done here.
Right.
Pretty much just get stored over here.
Yeah. Have you ever wanted to see DeLoreans? Yeah, Jen never seen one ever, right? And now we're in a room that's all there are is DeLoreans, including one that was on fire and one that was crashed. And this one's a perfect runner, except it's cold and it doesn't want to stay at one idle. And it sounds like, if you ever heard an old Detroit diesel and a up and down, or anything supercharged, it's not
like that in cold weather. Yeah.
Explain the story of graining. I've heard about I guess the grain of the stainless steel.
Yeah.
There's a proper way to take care of it compared to, I don't know, I'm looking at.
Well, the stainless gets scratched really easily, and especially if the cars get dusty or if you put a cover and pile stuff on them. And you slide anything against the grain. I don't know if your camera can pick it up, but this car, it's in decent shape, but there's a lot of little grain issues where grain should be going this way on this car, all the way down. And you can see a lot of these small scratches. And there's a bunch of different tools we use depending on.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing them like one here, kind of cut that way.
The camera's picking those up, but all the grain we want going, front to back basically. And they're over the years, there's been a bunch, put in off directions on this car. The most mild thing you can do is just we have a Scotch-Brite pad. That'll take out the real small stuff. You can probably see this with your eye, but not with the camera. To get deeper, you can go to sanding, and you can change the grit of the sandpaper depending on how deep those are. And then we have filing and grinding equipment for really big scratches, really deep scratches.
Yeah, because you can see it green. Again, I don't know if it's going to come out on camera. I think it does because I can kind of see it in the camera view screen. But it almost is like a wood grain where it's obviously in a direction, horizontal to the car.
Yep.
Okay. Because I've heard about it, never really got too close to one to actually see exactly what they were talking about.
Well, actually,
oh, this shows up perfect because of the light. This is the hood of another one here. And you can see the grain going front to back.
This is what we'd use. It's a Scotch-Brite for real minor stuff. You can take this out. This would be more aggressive. So this is what we call a wolf head or a vertical head. It's 12 flaps of sandpaper that's run on a drill or an air tool. The factory would have used an air tool. Nowadays we usually just use drills. And so this is probably one of our main tools for restoring the grain in the car.
Okay.
And,
awesome.
There's one more that gets even more aggressive than this that I'm trying to look for.
How long does it take to do a whole, to get the whole thing done?
It's usually about an hour per panel, and there's 8 panels on the car. So if you do the whole car.
So you're a full 8-hour day to regrain a car.
The ones that typically get scratched are the flat surfaces. The hood and roof are usually get it the worst because that's where people tend to set things. But we can do it panel by panel. Sometimes they'll just have one panel that's really scratched or been dented at some point, and you don't necessarily have to do the entire car.
Now, what's your hourly rate?
We're at $125 an hour.
155.
125.
125. 125 an hour, 8 hours to grain a whole car. If I guess it was really screwed up.
$1,000. Which, you know, basically I consider that kind of the equivalent of painting a car for a DeLorean, and so if you look at it that way, you can hardly get anything of a paint job for that kind of price.
Oh no, not even close. So you gonna do a demonstration for me here quick with that?
Yeah, hang on. This is a piece that there's a triangular piece here that's just a heat shield, and on this car, since it's there's so much stainless on this car, we actually made a stainless plate. It's usually an asbestos shield, and we replaced it with a stainless piece that I'm going to do some graining on to get it just to look cosmetically, take some scratches out of it. So, and then that's this guy right here, and this one I think you'll be able to pick up on camera. There's some lighter stuff in here I'll deal with later, but I'm going to go after right now this deep scratch right there. And I know I showed you some of the other equipment we have, but this is going to be way too, you know, how you would do this blending pad is you just go with the grain back and forth. That's going to be way too deep for this to take that out. And this is probably going to only take out small scratches that you really can't see with the camera. So the next step up from there would be the wolf head. And this will take out some pretty decent scratches. I don't think it's going to do that one deep one that we were showing on camera, but with a sharp, with a new sandpaper load, it's possible. See if I can do this without kicking this plate all over the workbench here. But you can probably see here, there's some medium scratches, I would say. They're kind of there's a Y, some more scratches on this side.
Yeah, I could see them. They're in the fingerprints.
Yep.
Oh, I could see it through the viewfinder now. Yep. Okay, that's very obvious.
Let me see if, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to knock those out. Actually did a pretty decent job, and even that deep one, it's so straight against the grain. I can still see some stuff in here, so this might need a little more work, and I will work this whole panel so it's got an even grain, that the entire thing has been worked with the same piece of equipment. But you know, from there, if it was even deeper, this is a drum sander. We can run this on a drill, and that would take out the really deep stuff. And then from here, I would go from this back down to this, and then I would finish with the blending pad at the end to get the stock type finish on the car like they would have had from the factory.
A lot more to that stainless than you thought, huh?
Mm-hmm. There is some special equipment for that. So then it gets a whole nother mess of torture devices if they have dents in them.
Now the red one here is turbocharged, you said, correct?
Twin turbo.
Earlier we were talking about the red one here, and this is a twin turbo car. He said it, and I really didn't video it too very well.
So this has what they would have called a aftermarket company called Long Island built what we call a Long Island twin turbo setup. And you can see there's a small IHI turbo mounted on each side, on each exhaust manifold. So there's one here on the right side, and then there's another one here on the left side.
Okay. So they're routing.
And then it's routed right up through, so it's feeding pressure through this pipe into the intake here.
So it's bringing it from here, from your throttle plates are here underneath in this piece.
Yep.
So the air comes through here. This is what works. This piece here I'm pushing down. That other car that was idling earlier, when it's going up and down, I'm assuming that's because this is bouncing a little. So the airflow pushes this down, which controls the fuel pressure, correct?
The fuel volume.
The fuel volume in your injector. Even though it looks like a distributor, it's a fuel injection pump, distribution pump, or however you want to call it.
This is basically it's a constant spray, so it's going to spray at the back of the valve all the time.
So,
there's
so it
no
doesn't hit
spin.
individually like an injector pump. It's there's pressure, same pressure here to here at the same exact time.
It's all putting the same amount to all 6 cylinders all the time.
Okay.
And this is basically going to control the volume. So as you increase throttle, it's going to increase air, which is going to increase fuel.
So effectively, it works similar to like on a Ford Mustang, like a mass airflow sensor or a throttle position
Pretty
sensor.
much, it's basically
By
mechanical.
measuring the airflow.
There's no electronic here, but it's just mechanically measuring the airflow with a teeter-totter with a flap.
So it enters here, comes out here, so it's kind of backwards to what you would think.
Yep.
The air enters here, comes back out the engine. Your throttle plates are here.
Yep.
And then on this particular car, instead of that,
These are the turbo inlets, and these would be the outlets pressurizing the intake runners that feed down into each chamber. And the reason they do that is because this flap needs to measure this turbo boost. So
Right.
that's why it's sucking through here, because then this sucking through here will push this flap down further to provide more fuel for the boost.
now what usually is here is a manifold you call what? It's like a heart shape kind of.
It's just what we call a W pipe. That
Oh,
kind of
W pipe, okay.
ties the two ends of the intake together.
Right, so
to
instead
balance
of
it.
that, so this is the factory one without the turbo. So your air comes through your air box, through your air metering valve, or for whatever term you want to use, out through your throttle plates. Obviously, your throttle plates is what governs how fast or how much throttle you're giving it, and then reverses around into your plenum and down into your intake and into the car.
And then you can see here's a good, this is running down into each port. So that's
So you're looking right at your throttle plates. The W pipe or manifold is gone, and there's your intake direct into your engine. These are where your injectors go. Now, what does do you have an injector handy? Is there a specific injector or a nozzle for here?
it's basically a nozzle because they're not electronic. So there will be a hose that comes off of these and goes right down to basically a spray nozzle.
Okay. And then your spark plugs in them bigger holes.
Yep.
And your distributor we were talking about would be right
Yep.
there.
Yep. That's your ignition distributor here. It's missing the cap and wires at this point, and then this is fuel distribution up the top. The engine is called a PRV, so it was a joint engineering project from Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo. And in the States, this similar version of this engine was used in some Volvo sedans. So a lot of times in the States, you'll hear this referred to as a Volvo engine, and there's some truth to that. In Europe, it was used in a lot of Peugeots and Renaults and was a very common engine in Europe.
And you said off camera you could compare this to a small block Chevy here in the States,
Yep.
meaning that it's readily available.
It was a very common
in its day.
It was just as common as a small block Chevy as in Europe as that is here in the States.
Now we've seen what twin turbo looks like on these, but twin turbo really didn't give you much more than a stage 2 kit, you said.
Right. They did it with boost, and we do it with better flow through the motor with headers, high flow exhaust, and port and polishing the heads, and a more aggressive camshaft grind.
And that'll get you up to about 200.
Yeah,
Horsepower.
our stage 2 is rated at 197, and that's pretty comparable to what a Long Island twin turbo would have produced.
And the car weight we discussed earlier.
28. They're a 2,800 pound car, a little more, 2,850. So a relatively light car.
This one's a lot cleaner and prettier.
We have seen photos of them getting dumped into the Galloway site.